Hello aspirants and welcome again to Legacy IAS Academy. In this lecture, we will be discussing about why the low inflation could be a problem for India's budget targets as well as finances. Now, very interestingly, few quarters back, we were dealing with a problem of high inflation, and that we have put to bed to a certain extent, and now we are dealing with a situation wherein the inflation is quite low. Now that is a good thing for the consumers. That means for us, the goods and services have become cheaper. But the same low inflation, which is good for the consumers, can actually have certain concerns with respect to the government, their finances, their budget, so on and so forth. So that and much more is what we will see in this particular lecture. So let's get started with respect to the present or the recent inflation trend in India. So the CPI inflation, that is the consumer price index inflation, the inflation that is measured at the consumer's end is 2.07%. That means about 2%, whereas the wholesale price index, which is calculated at the producer's level, is 0.52%. It means just 0.5%. Now, this is clearly showing the subdued prices. Now, this subdued means lowering of the prices is of course good for us consumers. That means the prices are not getting cheap, there is no deflation, the rates are not getting down, but the rate of increase of the prices is quite low. That means if something was 100 rupees worth, after 2% of inflation, it will be only 102. If inflation would have been 7%, it would have been 107. But now it will be just 102 rupees. So the increase is not much, as a result of which it is going to benefit the consumer. But on the contrary, it will be a challenge for the government and hence for the entire nation, of course. So we'll understand why this will be a challenge and how we can overcome this challenge. Before we move ahead, a small announcement about the new batches that are going to start. All of our batches has a maximum capacity of only 40 students, and you will be trained, guided, taught and mentored by the experts of UPSC Civil Services examination. Various batches, regular as well as weekend, are starting in the month of September as well as October. Once you enroll with us, there are a lot of benefits that you get. Some of them we have mentioned over here. So the first one is the comprehensive coverage of the GS paper. One-on-one mentorship is probably the most important thing that you will get, in addition to, of course, the other things like the daily mains answer writing practice, the test series for both prelims as well as mains. When it comes to the current affairs, we have a 360-degree coverage of current affairs, wherein the entire year's current affairs of course will be covered, but we will cover it weekly in the live classes. So the entire week's current affairs will get covered in live classes in order to ensure your comprehensive understanding. So if you want to enroll with us, you can simply download our app from Android as well as Apple, or you can directly log on to our website or call these numbers for getting enrolled. Now let's continue with the news. Now, what is the growth angle over here with respect to the inflation? With respect to growth, if you look at the growth, the real GDP has grown by 7.8%. Now, this is a good number. This is actually a good number, and that is what the reason was, for the Monetary Policy Committee to lower the interest rates to facilitate growth, and we have been able to manage that, and our growth has increased. But if you look at the nominal GDP is just 8.8%. That means, see, what is real GDP? Nominal GDP, when adjusted for inflation, gives you the real GDP. So real GDP, when you add inflation into that, gives you nominal GDP. Since our inflation is low, our nominal GDP as such is not that high. If inflation would have been higher, nominal GDP would have crossed maybe 10% as well. I hope this concept is clear. Now, the budget's assumption is, budget estimates. What does it estimate? It estimates the receipt by the government of India and the expenditure. So while assuming the receipt of the government of India, both tax and non-tax, the government assumed 10.1% of nominal growth rate, but that is clearly less. We have just 8.8, so that is clearly less than 10.1. Now, because of this low inflation, the nominal GDP gets dragged, as a result of which it will have lower tax buoyancy. That means low tax collection per unit of GDP. So the GDP, if it is X and it was giving us 0.75 unit of taxes, now it is going to give us, the same GDP is going to give us less amount of taxes. So this is one concern. Next is the fiscal impact. So if you talk about the tax collection, the gross tax revenue has increased by 1%, but the net tax revenue has gone down by 7.5%. And net tax revenue is the one that is actually important. Why? Because gross tax revenue is the total amount of revenue that is collected. But then how do we get the net? The net is nothing but the gross minus all the refunds, all the deductions, all the tax or money which the government has to give back because an additional sum would have been paid or a refund has now been approved, so on and so forth. So the real amount of money that still stays with the government of India is the net taxes, and that has gone down, that too by 7.5%. Now, because of these things, what is going to happen is the fiscal deficit. We have set a target of fiscal deficit at 4.5% and the debt to GDP at around 56%. These will start increasing. Let us see how. The idea is that nominal GDP is used as the denominator when you calculate fiscal deficit ratio or the debt to GDP ratio. So when you are saying fiscal deficit ratio, it is fiscal deficit divided by GDP. This GDP is nothing but the nominal GDP. When you are saying debt to GDP ratio, the GDP here is nothing but again the nominal GDP. If the nominal GDP is less because of less inflation, the ratio of fiscal deficit to GDP or the ratio of debt to GDP is going to be higher and our targets would be at risk, is what is suggested here. Moving ahead, there are of course certain structural concerns as well. Now, if you look at the structural concerns, what is it? See, if you look at the last 13 years data, the nominal GDP growth that was estimated by the government was actually less than the actual, basically nominal GDP growth which actually came after the fiscal year was completed was way less than what the budget has assumed, right? In 9 out of 13 years. So I repeat, in 9 out of 13 years, the nominal GDP came out to be less than what it was assumed in the budget. So in budget, we have assumed 10.1%. There is a high chance that it will be lesser, and we have seen so far it is only around 8.8%, as a result of which we may face an issue of missing out on our targets of debt to GDP, fiscal deficit to the GDP ratio, so on and so forth. Now, one good thing is that the corporate profits are strong, but at the same time, there is weak capex sentiment. That means weak sentiment for doing capital expenditure. Now, when you do capital expenditure, it leads to generation of more revenue, but if your capital expenditure is weak, that will also not happen. That means production can also take a hit. That means the economy can slow down. Now, further, the GST rate cuts will further dampen the nominal growth. Why? Because things will become cheaper. Now, things becomes cheaper. What is GDP? GDP is the total value of the final goods and services. Now, if you are, of course, when you take into consideration, there is factor cost, market price GDP is going to lower because the taxes now have basically gone down. So this will further dampen the nominal GDP, as a result of which there can be a situation wherein our tax collection may go down, so the budget may get more burdened, so on and so forth. So what can be the solution? The solution can be fiscal consolidation, try to collect the taxes more efficiently, increase the tax net. This year we are expecting more than 7 crore. 7 crore were already filed, so close to 8 crore of income tax filing will be happening, which should increase our tax collection. So these can be the things that bail us out in this scenario. Thank you.